How am I feeling today? It's been a long week, a few too many surprises and unplanned activities. And so while I'm feeling reasonably content, I'm also a little bit tired and a little bit frazzled. And so, but I'm hopeful about the weekend where I have much less planned and we'll be out in the country with my wife. And so I'm looking forward to it being relaxing. So I'm kind of optimistic that I can rest and recover this weekend. I do think, by the way, that one of the excellent ways that adults can develop their emotional intelligence is through the arts, whether it's reading great literature and getting into the motives of characters. We could do that in theater as well, or listening to music and getting in touch with the kinds of emotions that the music stirs in you, gives you a chance and a way to practice experiencing certain emotions in a safe way. But also, emotions are developed through visual arts, as you say, through your own work in the visual arts or through observing others and looking at their work. What does it stir in you? How does it make you feel? What's the contradiction in it? What's the conflict in it, etc.? It's just a great stimulus for talking about one's feelings and as a result, learning more about one's feelings.
Šodien jūtos divējādi. It kā vienlaikus atrastos divās psiholoģiskajās telpās. Vienā vēl dzīvo nedēļas nogales siltums, tuvās sarunas, atpūtas fragmenti, kuros dzīve šķita vienkārša un organiska. Un otrajā telpā ir nenoteiktība. Ne tikai personiska, bet kaut kādā ziņā arī laikmeta nenoteiktība, kas pēdējos gados kaut kāds pastāvīgs fons, tāda sunoņa, sanoņa, zūmoņa kaut kur aizmugurē. Vērtību sistēmas, kuras man ilgi likās stabilas, vienkārši brūk kopā, cilvēki paliek agresīvāki, sabiedrība fragmentētāka. Pazudusi tā pārliecība par rītdienu kā kaut ko saprotamu un prognozējumu. Vienlaikus ir tā, ka negribas iekrist nogurumā, pesimismā un cinismā. Tā gan kārdinājums ir to izdarīt, padarīt par bezjēdzīgu visu notiekošo, pasakot, ka tas viss tāpat slikti beigsies. Vēsture nekad nav bijusi īpaši labvēlīga mūsu pasaules nostūrim. Kāpēc lai tā būtu tagad? Un tomēr negribas domāt tikai šādās kategorijās. Es pamanu un novērtēju arī nelielos mirkļus, rīta kafiju, gaismas, spēlu sienas, sarunu, kurā nav jāspēlē loma, klusumu, mūziku, kas piešķir mirklim papildus dziļumu. Skrējiens reizēm apstājas, tāpat kā teikums reizēm apstājas aiz punkta. Un, protams, šajā dalītajā pasaulē, šajā mierā un personiskajā priekā un vienlaikus nemierā un neprognozējumībā gribas atrast līdzsvaru. Nezinu, kā to izdarīt. Katru reizi daru to no jauna. Un cenšos izjust pateicību par to, ka esmu dzīvs. Domājot par to, kā dzīve ir mani mainījusi, kā tā turpina mainīt arī tagad, jūtos no vienas puses godīgi rāms un no otras puses nebēdīgi priecīgs. Kā tāds neliels eksistenciāls protests šajā grūtajā laikā ir spontāns, ne ar ko nepamatots prieks par to, ka es esmu dzīvs. Varbūt tas arī ir galvenais. Tas nenozīmē justies nec labi, nec slikti. Tas nenozīmē, ka es esmu laimīgs vai skumjš. Es esmu abi. Ceru, ka jūs tāpat.
Mēs esam bieži pieraduši domāt par savu dzīvi un jautāt sev, kas tur nav kārtībā, ko es gribētu labāk, ko es gribētu uzlabot, ko es gribētu savādāk, kādi ir mani mērķi. Un cik bieži mēs uzdodam sev jautājumu, ko es gribētu, kam būtu jāpaliek tieši tā, kā tas ir tagad. Kas ir tas, kas man patīk savā dzīvē, kas ir tas, ko es nekad negribētu pazaudēt, kam būtu jāpaliek, kam nevajadzētu mainīties. Un tās ir tās lietas, kas man sagādā prieku, un man prieku sagādā tas, ka es varu pamosties no rīta, man ir mana rīta kafija, man ir mans dators, kurā es varu skatīties ēpastus un pastrādāt, jo tas man ļoti patīk. Es gribu, lai vienmēr paliek koku zāre, kuri šūpojas man aiz loga vējā, un, protams, es vienmēr vēlos, lai ar mani kopā paliek tie cilvēki, kas man ir tuvi un mīļi, mani draugi, mana ģimene, mani kolēģi, visi tie cilvēki, ar kuriem es jūtos labi. Un tas ir tas, kas mums sagādā prieku, un tas ir prieks, uz kuru ir vērts fokusēties, nemeklējot kļūdas un nepilnības, nemeklējot visu laiku to, ko vajadzētu mainīt un uzlabot. Bet, protams, arī ir citas emocijas, ja es ieslēdzu televizoru un paskatos ziņas. Es dzirdu par kārtējiem uzbrukumiem Ukrainas pilsētā, es dzirdu par dronu uzbrukumiem, es dzirdu par cilvēkiem, kuri izjūt nedrošību Latgalē, es dzirdu par tuviem austrumiem, par Latīņu Ameriku, par Amerikas prezidentu, un tad man ir dusmas, un tās ir absolūti pamatotas dusmas, un šīs dusmas man liek kaut ko darīt, un tad es varu pieņemt lēmumu, kas ir tas, ko es varu darīt, lai dotu savu ieguldījumu tam, lai pasaule kļūtu labāka. Tā kā varbūt es varu kļūt par miera aktīvisti. varbūt es varu runāt ar cilvēkiem par to, cik slikti ir šie cilvēki, kuri apdraud mūsu drošību un grauj klimatu un ekonomisko situāciju pasaulē un vienkārši nogalina cilvēkus. Protams, es negribu par to runāt pārāk ilgi, jo tad es varu tajā iestrēgt, bet tas ir kaut kas, ko es varu darīt ar savām dusmām, vai es varu palīdzēt tiem, kuri cieš. Es varu palīdzēt cilvēkiem Ukrainā, ziedojot naudu, es varu ziedot savu velosipēdu, vai tā kā darīt labas lietas citiem cilvēkiem, kas man palīdzēs konstruktīvā veidā risināt arī manas dusmas. Un varbūt es jūtu arī bailes reizēm, jo mēs dzīvojam laikā, kas ir nedrošs. Un, protams, no otras puses, tā kā katra paudze dzīvo laikā, kas ir nedrošs, un katrai paudzē ir arī sajūta, ka šis ir īpašs laiks, kurā es dzīvoju. Ja man ir bailes, un tās bailes ir pamatotas, tad, protams, es varu izdomāt drošības plānu, ko es darīšu, ja patiešām būs apdraudējums. No otras puses, es varu sajust to, ka pašreiz ir droša, tā kā šī zeme, kuras esmu, ir stabila, mēs dzīvojam, man ir mani koki aiz loga un man kafija. Es varu darīt to, kas man ir ieplānots, kā es varu fokusēties vairāk uz drošību, ja tās bailes nav tik pamatotas šajā mirklī. Un, protams, es varu izjust arī citas emocijas, kā es varu izjust vainas sajūtu par kaut ko es esmu izdarījusi nepareizi. Piemēram, es neesmu palaidusi kādu pareizi vienādas nozīmes krustojumā braucot pie stūres. Jā, tā ir mana vaina. Es varu vai nu viņu izpirkt un atvainoties otram šoferim, vai varbūt, ja tas pilnīgi nav efektīvi, jo mēs abi kaut kur steidzamies, tad es varu vienkārši izplānot, kā es darīšu labāk nākamreiz. Un varbūt man ir kauns par to, ko es esmu izdarījusi nepareizi, pateikusi kaut ko, ko nevajadzēja pateikt. Vai tas pats kaut kāds noteikuma pārkāpums satiksmē. Atkal, ko es varu darīt, kā es varu labot šo kļūdu, un vai varbūt būt līdzjūtīgi pret sevi un saprast, tā kā šī bija mana situācija tanī rītā, šinī rītā. Šis rīts nebija viegls, man bija pārāk daudz kaut kas, par ko domāt, un es vienkārši nepamanīju. Tā kā būt līdzjūtīgiem pret sevi. Un tas ir kaut kas, kas ir tik ļoti svarīgi. Sajust to, ko es jūtu šajā brīdī, apzināties, ko es jūtu, saprast to, cik šī emocija ir pamatota, cik tā ir atbilstoša reālajai situācijai un faktiem, un ko šī emocija liek man darīt. Vai tas, ko es darīšu, būs kaut kas, kas būs efektīvi, vai tas, ko es darīšu, būs man patiešām palīdzēs, vai man to nenāksies nožēlot vēlāk. Kā izprast to, apzināties savas emocijas, jo to funkcija ir labāk saprast sevi, labāk saprast citus cilvēkus un rīkoties atbilstoši savām vajadzībām un savām vērtībām.
As soon as I saw your message, two things. My first reaction was, this is timely and important. The idea of thinking in terms of emotional intelligence, just academically and intellectually, I think that's important. In terms of actually doing something to improve the human condition individually as well as collectively, I think art is the only direction. And so I was like, this is magnificent. I would love to be involved. And then I was like, oh, somebody's going to ask me how I'm feeling. And I'm often in what I describe as kind of a dissociated stupor of sorts, where I'm sure I have feelings, but I'm not necessarily consciously aware of them. And so I saw the message, how are you feeling? And I was like, okay, let me step back. And I was like, oh, but wait a minute. I do have strong feelings every day. They're just multidimensional and seemingly mutually exclusive, because I generally describe myself these days in terms of feelings as, simultaneously sad, mad, and glad. I'm sad by what's happening around us in all parts of the world, the war and military conflicts, the planet melting, the fact that economic instability and insecurity, and that we've got one guy, Elon Musk, richer than many countries and so on. And the fact that democracy is eroding at a relatively rapid rate, and that fascism is not just some kind of distant problem, particularly for the people in the United States, but it's happening right now before our eyes. And that makes me very sad. I'm also sad by just the folks of my generation. I'm 72, and so you get to the point where people of our age begin to be diminished and deceased. A lot of our older pets are no longer with us, and that also creates sadness. Sad as I sometimes consider the reality of my own finitude, and as the rate of time seems to accelerate, at a rather rapid rate. All right, and that makes me sad. And then I'm like, yeah, but I'm also really mad. I'm mad and disgusted at human beings, myself included. It's just the idea that, humans were great, in some ways. The ability to just imagine something and then make it happen. At our best, we can be quite humane and heroic. Yeah, on the other hand, we can be brutal and stupid, and perhaps the first form of life would be responsible for our own extinction. And so, that makes me angry, and yet I also, at the same time, I wake up these days and I'm extraordinarily glad to be alive, and glad to consider myself connected to everyone and everything around me. Glad at the possibility, perhaps, that anger, that being mad and disgusted might impel us, myself individually, as well as people in our community and so on, to take advantage of the fact that despite all of the problems that currently prevail upon us, that we as humans do have a pretty good track record of extricating ourselves from existential dilemmas by having the capacity to step back and to consider what's happening and why. And so here's where I think the emotional intelligence component comes in. You know, we seem to be preoccupied with thinking about these things intellectually when it is probably most productive not to dispose of our thoughts entirely, but rather to reflect upon them in terms of our actual feelings. And back to why I think this is a great enterprise. I think that we can do better and need to do better in terms of emotional intelligence. And that's why, and I think it's the artists that have always been at the vanguard of moving us in these kinds of productive and constructive directions. And so I guess that's how I'm kind of feeling, sad, mad, and glad at the same time.
This is a wonderful question, and I think it's a question we ask ourselves constantly while we're awake. And when you mentioned the professional and personal lives, I went through some pretty bad trauma about maybe 10 to 12 years ago, and it was a perfect storm because it coincided. My professional and personal life had separate crises at the same time. And I couldn't possibly devote full attention to both at the same time. And I just had to make a choice about what was the most important thing in my life and most important priority in my life. And I did, and I focused on that, which had to do with the safety and custody of my daughter, who was 5 years old at the time. And I had to neglect the other part, which is the professional part. And that cost me. It cost me a great deal because I could not attend to it. I could not respond to it. And sometimes people take lack of response to admissions of guilt or admissions of wrongdoing or something. It wasn't that, in fact. As the time has gone by, it shows that's not the case. But the problem was in the moment, I couldn't. I had to focus on my daughter. And everything went fine once I did that. But it has reverberations that last 10 or 12 years. One reverberation was I would wake up and 3 or 4 in the morning and never get back to sleep because I would stress and worry and stress and think about all the terrible things that might happen in both realms of my life. And this is interesting to me. And I was thinking about your question this morning because the worst part of my day, when you ask, how are you today, is when I wake up in the morning and then lay there before I get up and think and worry about all the things. It's a terrible time. And now I sleep later than 3:30 in the morning. But even so, it's still the worst time of my day when I come out of unconsciousness, when I come out of sleep into consciousness. And I've heard that this is the most likely time for people to have heart attacks is the first couple of hours after they wake up in the morning. I can see why this is. The best time for me is when I'm going to sleep. When I'm finally done with the day. And I think this has got any parent, of course, knows this, that you're with the little kids, you're so exhausted about dealing and being with them all day that you just collapse at night, and finally you get to sleep or have some rest and they're finally asleep at night. But the best time for me is to go from conscious awareness into unconscious. So it's interesting that coming out of sort of the sleep dream stage is the worst part of the day, but going into it at night is when I feel the best. I think there must be some reason for that. Now that I'm retired and I don't have all the daily stresses of, I have to do this and that, and I have to get my daughter ready for school, and I have to go to work, and I have to drive traffic, and all those things that take up your mind, when your mind is free from those, more relatively free, you have more time to dwell on things. And the sources of those things are usually the concerns and worries and problems that you have that you'd rather not think about, but you have to think about. And so my how am I today answer is a roller coaster. It's very bad early on. It's the worst. And then when I get up and have some coffee, like I'm doing right now, I feel better. And now that I know that at a metacognitive level, I can endure the bad part of waking up because I know once I get up and have some coffee and get into the world and have things coming into my head from the outside as opposed to laying there with my eyes shut, the world's now coming in and involving my mind. Now I feel better. And it's when I'm left alone that is the worst or the best, the worst in the morning and the best at night. And so I feel good or bad mainly because of my past and mainly because of the bad things that have happened. But then I have a day of being in a really wonderful home and with really supportive family and friends to talk to and interesting things to read and do. And at the end of that day, I'm feeling really content and happy. So there's no simple answer, as you knew, as you knew, because you're asking a very deep question here. There's no simple answer to how are you today, because there's not one feeling per day. A day is filled with different feelings and filled with a variety of ups and downs. And one good thing about retirement is, in general, I found people say this is like nirvana. People I know who retired said this is so good and so wonderful to be able to do what you want and not have the stresses that you've had your whole life, and it's really great. At the other end of that is you do have a lot of time to reflect and a lot of time to remember and a lot of time to worry, and you have less of the outside world coming in. You have more of the inside of your head dominating how you feel, and so it plays more of a role, I think, when you're retired and older than when you're younger and have things that take up your attention. So the answer to your question is right now with 4 cups of coffee in me, I feel great. And it's 10 o'clock in the morning here where I am. And I love coffee and I love the mornings. And I'll be fine the rest of the day, but the first hour or two after I woke up were horrible. And and it's been that way for 12 or 13 years. And I don't know if that's true for all people who go through traumatic experiences. If the early morning when they open their eye or when they wake up is the worst. But it's been that way for me for over 10 years. And all I can say is I sleep later and it's better than it was 10 years ago, but it's still the worst part of the day. It's scary. It's fear and it's anxiety. It's not angst, because it's actual fear. It's actually about things, and threats. And it's not real because those threats have gone away, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I'll tell you this other thing and this is another thing about being 70 or so. I have some relatives who are going through things in their life who are younger, nieces and nephews, and they talk about these things in their life, and it reawakens things when I was the same age. And it's amazing to me. I'm not a clinical psychologist, but it's amazing to me how much gets reawakened and reopened in your life from dealing with your children or the next generation as they go through the same problems you faced in your life, and how much that reawakens those feelings and fears and emotions again as you try to help them. It really does. It's something that, as we all know, caretakers pay a cost. Caretakers for other people, there's a cost that they have in helping others, and that's underappreciated. But It's real. So that's my rambling answer to this very deep question that you're asking.
Today I feel good. I'm sitting in my eldest daughter's bedroom because she's away, and I can see pictures of that she's drawn, some of which are of women without clothes on, which is always interesting. I was thinking about it as the background. I didn't blur it. And she's 20 and is into drawing. And I'm in a work pattern at the moment where I'm working for the first time in my life for a company. And I work in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and today is Friday. So I went and had coffee with a friend and bought my Friday morning challah, which is the bread for the Friday night dinner, in a cafe where I met by chance 4 or 5 people I knew, and then walked home with my challah, with my bread. And so all of those kinds of routines were ways of signaling that it's a work day, but a day where I don't have to rush in and be in the office environment, which is nice. I did a thing last night, which was to stay up late and clear my inbox, which meant that when I woke up this morning, there are things that needed doing, but I knew what all those things were, right? And so there's a difference between things you know you need to do and things you don't. I've just come back this week from holiday in a very cold country and came back to a relatively warm London. There was a 30-degree centigrade difference between the temperature in the air when I got on the plane and when I got off the plane. And in that very cold country, I ate a lot of very good food, including reindeer stew, which I never had before. So in myself, I feel fed, but also like I'm burning calories, and so that's good. And I'm sitting on a stool which makes me sit up. So normally when my desk comes down. So in that sense, I feel physically good enough. I cycled a lot this week, and I'm a fair weather cyclist. So when it's really pouring, I don't, but I always feel good on the bicycle. It's my diagnostic. I had a cold 2 weeks ago, and I diagnosed myself by my legs. So when I push to go off from the traffic lights or up the hill, I notice whether there's something there or not. Sometimes you push and you really go, and sometimes you push and nothing happens. And yesterday I pushed and went. So that feeling was really good. And also I have this hydrostatic theory, this theory of emotional sources and sinks. So basically there are these sources of tension in your life, and then there are these places where you discharge or that the tension leaks out. And if you think about a system of tubes that's full of liquid, the place where the leak comes is not necessarily the place where the pressure is going in. It can, because it's the liquid connects. And for me, when I'm cycling, if I have a source of tension in my life, then I notice that I'm an asshole when I cycle, like I'm rude to people. And I observed in myself that I wasn't rude to anyone on the way home. So this suggests a degree of, satisfaction with things. And I guess, like as a neuroscientist, 15 years of neuroscience research, I'm very interested in how feelings are embodied, and I know lots of things about the brain and all that stuff. But it's entirely clear to me that the way you learn about yourself is really partly through your body. I mean, my daughter's room has a mirror, which is behind the screen. I can tell how I am by how I see my reflection. If I see myself smiling, I can tell if I'm angry by noticing whether I shout at people when I'm cycling. I can tell whether I have a cold by sensing my legs. And I guess my point is that you can't work on yourself directly, right? You can't make yourself happy. And again, we know from neuroscience that if you hold a pen in your mouth like that, it makes the muscles that you use to smile. You're not smiling, but those muscles are engaged. And we know that you rate pictures on a scale as being happier pictures when you rate them with a pen in your mouth, right? So I guess my point is that as smart as we are, as experienced as we are, and as much science as we know, the only way we can really access ourselves and the only way we can have effects on ourselves is through the world. is through our observing the effect that we have in the world, the things that we do, observing our actions, but not of ourselves, but observing them in the world, and by making changes to the world that we live in, by making habits or environments. And I guess that sense I find quite, I don't mean quite liberating, because it is, you are trapped in yourself, but to be yourself, you have to understand outside and things outside yourself. And to change yourself, you have to get over yourself and work into the world as well. And that I find to be quite a relaxing insight. And it generally serves me well. So thanks for asking. I mean, so far so good.
Es teicu, skumjas tā ir brīnišķīga iespēja ieskatīties sevī un caur šīm skumjām sevī atpazīt citos cilvēkos līdzīgas emocijas un veidot ar viņiem saiknes un atbalstu un saprast, un skumjas mums palīdz arī atbalstīt citus cilvēkus un iemācīties saņemt atbalstu no citiem cilvēkiem. Patiesībā skumjas ir emocijas, kuras pavada citas emocijas un padara mūs cilvēcīgākus. Jāsaka gan, ka skumjas arī sajūt dzīvnieki. Bet es domāju, ka skumjas ir ļoti cilvēcīgas. Bet tas, ko man gribētos novēlēt tik vienam Latvijā, un arī viens no iemesliem, kāpēc mēs uzsākām šīs diskusijas, ir jāprot atpazīt savas emocijas. Un saprast, kāpēc viņas mūsos rodās, un ka tā ir mūsu reakcija uz pasauli, un ka nevajag vienmēr vainot citus cilvēkus mūsu emocijās. Protams, ka viņi zināmā mērā izraisījuši, bet tas, cik lielā mērā mēs uz to, teiksim, reaģējam, tas ir atkarīgs no mums, un mēs varam ļoti daudz ko iemācīties un ļoti daudz ko mainīt un uzlabot savu emociju pratību. Un tas ir bezgalīgi svarīgi, lai mēs dzīvotu tādā veiksmīgākā un saskanīgākā sabiedrībā.
I am feeling inspired today. I have had a meeting with collaborators from Chile and from the UK. We are working on a project, and we are at that exciting part of it when we are starting to learn something new, and I am curious of what is to come. It is a very important question because by identifying what we are feeling, we know where we are, and that can have multiple consequences, especially if we identify what we are feeling in a very granular way, in a very specific way. Emotion scientists have found that identifying very specifically what we are experiencing in the moment is a first step towards regulating our emotions. Just that act of saying what you are feeling can make you feel better, if you need to feel better at the moment, closer. At the beginning of our conversation, I was feeling very curious and inspired and having new ideas. But imagine feeling stressed. Imagine feeling that unpleasantness and the activation. And we usually use the word stress to describe it. But if we go and consider, is there a different label we can attach to it? Could we be more specific than saying stressed? Could it be that we are disappointed by something? Or could it be that we are anxious because of an element of uncertainty in something we are doing? That will give us more information, and that will then hint to different things that we can do in approaching that and dealing with that feeling.